union workers downtown, helping us develop pretty much everything else that we see in the greater downtown area. Now, believe it or not, these round stone recessed balcony windows are the byproduct of modernism. If you look over, staying on your left-hand side, you'll see this big, boxy, boring, square, black building. You know, modernism. This is the last design by the king of modernism, a man named Mies van der Rohe. Not only was he an architect, he was one of America's great architectural teachers. His number one student, Bertrand Goldberg, the man who creates the complete opposite of modernism. We're going to talk about Bertrand Goldberg a little bit later, but the real conflict between these two, Bertrand Goldberg says there are no right angles in nature. Why should my architecture have right angles in it? As we come back, you'll get some incredible photos of those two towers. As we come under, I want to point out the sort of what I call the granddaddy of architecture in Chicago. Straight ahead, you'll see the clock tower building just off to the left. This is the house that Juicy Fruit built. That clock tower building is, of course, the Wrigley Building. That is the sort of architectural celebration of moving Chicago northwards. That was the first commercial building on the north side of the river, and it is bought and paid for by Juicy Fruit. You see, in 1893, Mr. Wrigley was a soap salesman, and not a very good one. He was using his little side hustle of chewing gum to bribe people into buying his laundry soap. 1893 is also the year Chicago gets selected to host the World's Fair, the world's biggest party. 27 million people come to a city which at that point had a poop river running through it, and 27 million people was a pretty good audience to introduce Juicy Fruit. 30 years later, after the World's Fair, he just wraps up construction on both pieces. It cost him about $18 million in 1920s money, which Mr. Wrigley paid for up front and in cash in its entirety. If you think about how much $18 million was in the 1920s, think about a pack of gum in that 30-year window cost 1 penny. How many pennies goes into $18 million? Now you can imagine a penny of that penny being kept in profit. They estimate somewhere at least 100 billion packs of gum were probably sold by Mr. Wrigley in that 30-year span. And as we come under, you just rode under the busiest walking street in Chicago. On the north side is the Magnificent Mile, but this sort of road here, believe it or not, is not named after the greatest state in the Union. It is named after the lake, named after the greatest state in the Union. Michigan Avenue, right behind you, is actually because Michigan Avenue is the historic coastline of Lake Michigan.